Wow, what a wonderful group of people this is. This is just amazing. We call them around the office God wow moments. And when Wendy and her team were putting this together, they had contemplated a room for 50. And her team of people that were working with her said, you're going to need a bigger room than that. And they talked her into it, and I think she's glad that they did. So next year, we're going to, like they said in Jaws, we're going to need a bigger boat. We're going to need a bigger room next year when we do this. First, let me introduce my wife, Vicki. This is my wife, Vicki Pryor. She's my bride of almost 37 years now. So we have 3 wonderful kids and 6 wonderful grandkids, 5 boys, 1 girl, and they are scattered all over the country. But we've been super blessed. First of all, before I say anything about myself, I just want to say thank you. Echo what Doug had said earlier. You know, if I could sum up my first year and 2 months at Crossroads, it would be humbling. When I look at this group of people, when I look at the support that Crossroads has now and has had over the years, it is really humbling, just truly humbling. I've had the opportunity to travel into international countries this year and meet some of our leaders in different countries, and again, humbling. The sacrifices they make, the work that they do. And when I pray for Crossroads, I pray for our students, I pray for our mentors, I pray for our staff, our volunteers, our board of directors, and our financial supporters, of course, as well. Remove any one of those components, and we're in trouble. So God has placed each person in their role in Crossroads, as Wendy said, for such a time as this, at this amazing time to be in this ministry. So thank you for everything you do. I'm not going to belabor me. I have a history in prison ministry. As a matter of fact, next, what is today, the 14th? 10 days from now, 9 or 10 days from now, I will celebrate my 40th year since my ordination. So all that means is I'm old. I've been around quite some time. But I pastored a few churches along the way, but shortly after my graduation from seminary in 1988 in North Carolina, pastoring a church, minding my own business, and a prison chaplain joined our church, he and his family. And he got me interested in prison ministry, and I said one evening to him, I said, well, I'm kind of interested in this. What do I need to do? He said, well, you'd be pretty good at it. And I said, well, how do I apply? And 9 months later, I was walking into a prison in Tallahassee, Florida, as a staff chaplain, and fell in love with it. It just seemed like what I should be doing. We've been all over the country. We've lived in 10 states. We've moved 15 times in our 36 years of marriage. We stay just one step ahead of any kind of trouble. So if you're ever wondering, every 2-3 years, get out of town. Now, we have been truly blessed with this ministry. About a year and a half ago, I was minding my own business again, doing some consulting work in South Carolina where we had just bought a home. And a friend of mine, a mutual friend of Lisa Bleister, my predecessor, he called me. He had been talking with her. She wanted to retire. And he called me, and he's got this wonderful Texas, Oklahoma accent. He said, hey, buddy, I got in your business. I said, what did you do, Jack? And he said, I put your name in for something. I said, what did you do, Jack? and Jack told me, I'd heard of Crossroads. Of course, I was in prison ministry for 21 years in the federal system. And he told me that about the position at Crossroads. Long story short, they told me, you're going to have to move to Michigan. I said, well, I just bought my house in South Carolina. I can't. And then 6 months later, they called back and said, well, how about if we just go back and forth? You got to be in Michigan some every month. So that's what's worked out. And we're just blessed. We are just so incredibly blessed to be a part of this community. And we were from day one so impressed with the Grand Rapids community, the West Michigan culture. I learned the phrase West Michigan nice, and it's very, very true. Very, very true. So I apologize for not getting around to meet everyone, but there's more of you than there is of us. But I do look forward to meeting each one of you in person someday soon. Crossroads. I call it the miracle of Crossroads. You all are a part of that miracle. 1984, our founder, Tom DeVries, he was visiting prison in Kent County Jail. And he got frustrated because his students in his Bible study kept transferring and leaving, and he cared about them. He had a heart for them. And they would move to other prisons, or they would get out of prison, and he would lose touch with them, and that frustrated him. So he developed this really neat little correspondence method so he could stay in touch with the people he cared for, with the people that were his students. Fast forward a few years, Back to God radio station in Chicago had an interest in this story, this nice little ministry, and it kind of exploded onto the scene. This is how I understand it. So from those humble beginnings, and this is again the miracle of Crossroads, from those humble beginnings, we now have a presence, we have students in about 1,900 prisons in the United States. Think about that. 1,900 prisons and jails in the United States. We have roughly 3,000, 3,100 mentors. Many of you all are in this room, all around the country. We have over 24,000 students enrolled just this fiscal year so far, and we still got a quarter to go, almost a quarter to go. 24,000. Some cities don't have that many. We have international presence in 23 countries, and some amazing leaders who sacrifice so much, who don't have the mail service like we have, where you can put a stamp on something and put it in the mail and it gets to them in a few days. They're delivering lessons on motorcycles and bicycles and the trunks of their cars and horseback and any other way that they can to get the gospel to people in prisons where they serve. And we have about over 6,000 students around the world. So we're serving, delivering the hope of the gospel of Christ to about 30,000 people on any given day. That's pretty amazing, isn't it, from those humble beginnings? That's the miracle of Crossroads. I could not have orchestrated that. Been in prison ministry since 1990. I could not have I'm not smart enough to have orchestrated that. God had his hand in that, and God has done that. God has grown Crossroads Prison Ministries. God placed it on the heart of those who were in that founding group to care about people enough, and then he just exploded this ministry. And look at us today. We're going to need a bigger room next year, Wendy. It's exciting. Ironically, the same issue that the founder of this ministry had some almost 40 years ago, we're facing today. He was losing his students. We're losing students, but for a different reason. There are massive amounts of drugs coming into prisons and jails in ways that many of us would not have even ever conceived of. Drugs are being planted in the glue on envelopes, in the glue on the backs of stamps. Drugs are being soaked into paper, envelopes, letters. I had a corrections chief in one state tell me that there was so much drugs in one sheet of paper that it had a street value of $10,000 on one piece of paper. So guess what? A lot of prisons and jails are saying, no more mail. No more mail. And they've gone to these third-party scanning services. Well, our lesson books, you know what they look like. Our lesson books don't scan very easily. You can't run them to a scanner and have them delivered to a student in the format that they look like. So we're having to go to great expense to look at various ways that we can reformat lessons, various ways that we can work with these third-party scanning companies to make sure that our lessons can get to the hands of our students. And it's very difficult, it's very challenging, because we have 50 different state correctional systems in this country. They're all independent, they're all different, and they all do it in their own way. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. So that's one of our challenges. The other challenge that we're having is that a lot of prisons are, and it's a trend, it's moving toward digital delivery. There are over 1 million tablets. How many of you have a tablet, iPad, something like that? A lot of you all. There are over 1 million tablets. They're not iPads. They're sort of hardened for prisons. They're clear so you can't hide anything in them. There's over 1 million tablets in the hands of prisoners in jails and prisons around this country. And more prisons are going to that scanning process, but instead of delivering it in a scanned copy that's sanitized and clean and free of drugs, they're delivering it in essence in an attachment to an email. Presents another challenge for us. The more that happens, how do we deliver our lessons to our students if they have to be delivered electronically? Well, the alternative is we just say, well, we can't serve those students. I don't know about you all, but that's not acceptable to me. You know, that's acknowledging that we have a segment of the population that we can't serve. I don't think our founder would have settled for that, and we're certainly not going to settle for it. So we are in the process of developing digital versions of our lessons, and we're working with organizations who can help us do the mentor connection, because we're not going to give that up. Help us do the mentor connection electronically. So envision this, you who are mentors in the room. You might become, as a mentor, you get your lesson in the mail these days. It may come in the future, and for some students, as an attachment to your email. Okay. Now, I'm hearing some sighs in the room. I understand that. But again, is it an acceptable alternative to lose our students? To have that student not receive the gospel? Okay, it's not ideal. We would much rather, hear me clearly, we would much rather keep doing things the way we're doing it. Because it's been effective for 40 years almost, and we touch a lot of lives. And you cannot replace the intimacy of that handwritten letter. Something about that letter says somebody took time to put pen to paper, and it meant something to them. That's how critical that is. But if the alternative is to lose the student, to not be able to get the gospel to them, for me personally, that's not an acceptable alternative. So, you would receive the lesson, you would open that attachment, you would make the comments on the lesson, you would write the encouraging letter, and it would be sent back to the student. We don't know how all that's going to work yet. But it's a great expense to do that. We've also known that, we also have learned that we have to talk to the right people in these correctional agencies. So we've joined this organization called the Correctional Leaders Association, and it's comprised, the members of that organization are the heads, the directors, the commissioners of all the different state systems, so 50 states. I think the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico is in there as well, plus the Federal Bureau of Prisons. So over 50 leaders, top leaders, are in this organization, and we have joined as they call it a corporate partner, we're a ministry partner, but we've joined in their corporate partner program, because that puts us in touch with them 7 or 8 times a year, in the room with them, face to face, where we can share with them our problem, our concern. I've yet to find one that said, oh no, we don't want to keep Bible studies out of prisons. We have a drug issue that we have to deal with. People are overdosing. So work with us. So this connection that we're making in the Correctional Leaders Association is important, but it's expensive. That membership has 3 levels. The first level, we tried. It doesn't give you much access. It really wasn't worth it. It was $5,000 a year. So we bump up to the next level, which is where we are right now. That's $25,000 a year. But that's the only way that we can be face to face with the people that we need to talk to. And it's already bearing fruit. I met with the director at one of these meetings from New Mexico, told her we were having concerns getting our lessons into some of her prisons. Just this past week, Bernice in our operations department, she got a phone call from their deputy commissioner, and he said, hey, the commissioner talked to me, and we don't want this to happen, so tell me where the problems are, we're gonna solve it. So we're back in New Mexico. Thank God. You can applaud that. So we're very thankful for that, but it's a costly endeavor. The digitizing of our lessons, where's Douglas? He's our star, okay? He's sort of the face of our ministry, you might say, but he does such a great job. I watch people watch Doug, and he just has this appeal where, you know, people just listen to him. They're just drawn into what he says, and we're thankful. That's a God-given gift. But the reality is the cost of developing these lessons, these digitized versions, and eventually we're going to put it out there so you all can see these. They're really, really good. They're compelling. And the first series that we've done, it's a small group of people, like a small group discussion that Douglas is leading. Everybody in the small group, they're not actors, they're actually formerly incarcerated people, men and women. And he's leading them through the lesson that they would have had in their book, asking the same questions, and their answers are unscripted and powerful. Powerful. So we're trying to do it in such a way where it's not second best, where we're delivering the message in an impactful way for people to receive it in the way that they can receive it on tablets. So that's kind of exciting news, but each lesson in the quality that the tablet providers are demanding costs anywhere from $20,000 to $25,000 to produce. So we have some headwinds. We have some headwinds, and it's important for you as ministry partners to know that, because people don't, it's not something that the average person in the public, oh, well, look what they're doing, drugs are coming into prison. That's not part of the normal conversation, but it's a part of our world. It's a part of what we're doing. And when we get letters from students saying, my lesson came to me in a format that's just all messed up and I can't even understand it, or we get a letter from a student that says, hey, I just learned that my facility is no longer accepting mail and is rejecting my lessons, what can I do? We can't put that letter in the trash. We have to be sensitive to that. I believe it's the Christ-like thing to do, to be sensitive to that. We can't just ignore that. That's a plea for help. So we're doing everything we can to do as our founder did and deal with the issue of losing students. Now, how big is it? When I first came to Crossroads 14 months ago, there were about 100 facilities that were rejecting our lessons. Less than 6 months later, that number had grown to 120 facilities that just turn our lessons away. That number is now over 150 facilities. And more facilities are going to these new methods of delivery. And my fear is that if we don't stay ahead of it, that our numbers will decline. And that's, again, I've said it several times in this talk, it's just really just not acceptable at all. So the world of corrections is changing, and that's the world in which we operate. That's where our students live. That's where they are. So, a little future talk. What are our hopes and dreams? As we look at all these possibilities that are out there to reach people, you know, we as collectively as a group, we also have a heart for the families of those who are incarcerated. How can we best facilitate those relationships? Now, this is several years in the future. We've got to get there. How can we best facilitate that? What if? Think about this. How many of you have a phone, a cell phone, iPhone? Do you have apps on those phones? Okay, some of you use, some of you go, I don't even know what that app is. It just appeared on my phone somehow. But I'm not going to erase it because something bad could happen. I don't know what. So what if we had a Crossroads app that was available to students? I mean, to families, I'm sorry, available to families. And on that app were some of the same lessons that that student is studying, so that when they get on the phone together, they have something really positive and substantive to talk about. Isn't that cool? Yes. So quick story around that. How am I doing on time, Wendy? I'm okay? Okay, I'm sorry. You've asked a Baptist preacher to keep to 20 minutes. To be fair, I don't think that's done in history. When I was a chaplain at a prison in Pennsylvania, Our children were young. One child was young, the others were a little older. And they watched, remember that cartoon show Rugrats? Remember that? Well, many people don't know, they did religious themed shows at different times of the year. This was, I believe it was Easter. And I learned that they were going to do an Easter show. So I did a Thursday evening Bible study in this prison. And on that Thursday evening, I wheeled the TV in and told the guys that came to the Bible study, hey, we're going to do something different tonight. We're going to watch Rugrats. They're like, Chaplain, what are you talking about? We're going to watch a cartoon? I'm like, oh, you guys will enjoy it. It's fun. They didn't know it was an Easter themed program. So they watched the program, and then something happened that I'll never forget. As soon as it was over, they ran for the phones because their kids were watching Rugrats. And they had something to talk to their kids about. Isn't that amazing? I didn't anticipate that, but it taught me how important those family relationships are. If in the future we as Crossroads can broaden our vision enough to say we'll still do what we do, we are Crossroads, we have this purity of mission. If we can bring the gospel to our students, but also help them reconnect with their families, then we can really be impactful in this reincarceration cycle of incarceration problem that we have in this country. So here's the reality. 24,000 students enrolled with Crossroads this year. That's about 1% of the population of people in prisons and jails in this country. 1%. That means 99% are not being reached by us with the gospel. So I challenge you to pray for us. When the board interviewed me, and we got a couple of board members here, so y'all might remember, they asked me what attracted me to Crossroads. I'll close with this and we'll have questions. And I said, it's the purity of the mission. The purity of the mission. We do one thing and we do it really well. We deliver the gospel of Christ into our students in prison, and we match them with caring mentors who want to encourage them to live a Christ-like life. So we are Christ-centered. We are student-focused. And that's the way we're going to stay.